Latino street musician harassed by police. Decades later, he trains the FBI. The subway echoed with the sound of a worn guitar, its melody cutting through the rattle of trains and hurried footsteps. A young Latino street musician strummed his heart into every note, dreaming that music might lift him beyond poverty. But before his song could finish, two police officers stormed down the platform. They accused him of loitering, mocked his accent, and shoved him against the wall. His guitar, his only treasure, clattered to the floor. That night, humiliation carved itself into his soul. What those officers didn't know was that the same boy they tried to silence with handcuffs would one day stand before the FBI, not as a suspect, but as their teacher. Before we continue this story, if you haven't subscribed to our channel yet, make sure to subscribe now. Don't forget to hit the like button and press the bell icon so you never miss our new stories. Alejandro Cruz grew up in El Paso, Texas, in a neighborhood where the desert sun baked the streets and music floated from every porch. His family had crossed from Mexico years before, carrying only faith, a few belongings, and a hunger for opportunity. Alejandro's father worked long hours in construction, while his mother cleaned houses. Their lives were modest, but rich in love and tradition. From an early age, Alejandro was drawn to sound. He could turn anything into rhythm. Spoons against a table, buckets turned into drums, a cheap guitar his uncle once brought from Juarez. Music was his escape, his language, his dream. But dreams didn't pay bills. By 14, Alejandro was playing in the streets, busking for spare change to help his parents. The subway became his stage, the echo of his guitar competing with trains, footsteps, and voices in 100 languages. Sometimes, strangers stopped to listen, dropping coins into his open case. Sometimes, they ignored him completely. And sometimes, worse, they mocked him. The police, in particular, seemed to take issue with his presence. On more than one occasion, officers demanded he pack up and leave, even when he had the proper permit. But one night changed everything. Alejandro had just finished playing a song he'd written himself, a soulful ballad about migration and hope. Applause from a few commuters warmed his heart. Then, two officers approached. Their tone was sharp, their eyes full of disdain. They accused him of being a nuisance, called him a border rat, and forced him to the ground. One officer even kicked his guitar aside. The wood cracking as it hit the concrete, Alejandro's cheeks burned with shame. He wasn't a criminal. He was just a boy with music. But in that moment, he realized the world saw him differently. Not as talent, but as trouble. Alejandro didn't quit. If anything, the humiliation fueled his determination. He repaired his guitar with tape, his fingers blistered, but his spirit unbroken. Every note became sharper, louder, more defiant. Music was no longer just about survival. It was his way of fighting back. Through his teens, he began blending traditional Latino rhythms with American jazz and blues. He read music theory at the library, practiced scales late into the night, and studied legends like Santana and Miles Davis. While others doubted him, Alejandro believed in one truth. Music carried power, but poverty trailed him like a shadow. His parents' health declined, bills piled up, and Alejandro often went hungry. The easy path would have been to give up, to take a low-paying job and bury his dream. Instead, he doubled down. He played at weddings, quinceañeras, and dive bars, wherever someone would let him plug in an amp or strum his guitar. At 19, his break came when a local professor heard him play in the subway. Impressed, she introduced him to a community college music program. It wasn't glamorous, but it was a step. Alejandro thrived, mastering not just performance, but composition and ethnomusicology, the study of how culture shapes sound. Over time, Alejandro's reputation grew. He started recording, teaching workshops, and eventually earned a scholarship to study at a top conservatory. His once mocked music now opened doors to stages he never imagined. But Alejandro's true genius wasn't just in playing, it was in understanding people through music. He realized that rhythm, tone, and cadence could reveal truths beyond words. In his doctoral studies, he began exploring how cultural music patterns could be applied to communication, negotiation, and even law enforcement training. Years later, Alejandro published groundbreaking research on using music and rhythm to identify emotional states, predict conflict, and improve cross-cultural understanding. His work caught the attention of universities, government agencies, and finally, the FBI. The same system that once cuffed him for strumming a guitar in a subway now sought his expertise. The Bureau invited him to lecture on communication through sound, using music as a bridge between cultures during interrogations, negotiations, and community policing. Alejandro stepped into that role with quiet pride, but deep inside, the memory of cracked guitar wood on a subway floor still lived. The day Alejandro first lectured at Quantico, he walked into a room full of agents in crisp uniforms. The irony was sharp. Decades earlier, men in similar uniforms had treated him as less than human. Now, he was here as their instructor, their authority. He began not with theory, but with music. He strummed his guitar, the same one he had once played in subway tunnels, restored and polished. The room hushed. He played rhythms from Latin America, blues from the Deep South, and jazz that spoke of struggle and resilience. Then he explained how sound could calm, agitate, or connect. As the session ended, an older agent approached him. His badge read Lieutenant O'Connor. Alejandro froze. The name was familiar. Too familiar. O'Connor was one of the officers who had humiliated him as a teenager, who had mocked his accent and cracked his guitar. Time had aged the man, but Alejandro recognized the same cold eyes. The difference was that now O'Connor stood on the other side of the table. For a moment, silence stretched between them. Then, to Alejandro's astonishment, O'Connor extended a hand. "Never thought I'd be learning from you," he muttered. His tone wasn't quite apologetic, but it wasn't arrogant either. Alejandro didn't take the hand immediately. Instead, he met O'Connor's eyes and said, "Music always has a way of changing the rhythm." O'Connor lowered his gaze. The balance of power had shifted forever. Alejandro went on to train thousands, not just FBI agents, but police departments, universities, and international organizations. His work showed how sound and culture could bridge divides that laws and policies often failed to cross. He never forgot where he came from. Alejandro funded scholarships for young Latino musicians, built community centers in his old neighborhood, and spoke openly about his past. At every lecture, he told the story of a boy once humiliated for playing guitar in a subway who refused to stop strumming. His message was simple. Every sound has power. The question is whether we use it to silence or to heal. Years later, at a ceremony honoring him for contributions to law enforcement training, Alejandro stood on stage as applause filled the hall. He thought of his parents, his taped-up guitar, and that subway floor where his dream was nearly crushed. But instead of bitterness, he felt gratitude, because in every insult, every shove, every broken string, there had been a hidden rhythm, one that had carried him exactly where he was meant to be, so the story lingers. How many Alejandros were silenced before their music was ever heard? And how many more could transform the world if only given the chance to play their song?